Hi everybody and welcome to a tutorial just showing how to create a pretty basic medieval house. We had a request to redo the really old tutorial that I had on this. I'm going to start by building this, I think, in chunks, as if I were constructing a real building or parts of that anyway. So simplest way is to start with the foundation first. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-K, and that's going to bring up the shape creation menu. And this is a little easier than just using Control-K and then moving the sides and such out, because I can directly set the size of everything here. In this case, I'm pretty sure I want it to be actually 30 meters is way too large. Maybe 10 by 1 meter tall. Actually, definitely more like a quarter of a meter by 10 meters. So that's a pretty good foundation for a house. And I'll click on Build Cube, and there's the start. So if we want to do it right away, I can drag on a FPS controller. In this case, I just have the standard Unity controller, and I can walk around on this right away and start to get sort of a feeling for the size of what I'm creating. So this is I guess the big advantage of ProBuilder, I like to say, is that you can instantly prototype always. So I'll just leave this here and just rotate it around a bit and hide it so it's not messing up my scene. So we have the base for our house, not really much else going on right now. Like I was saying, I kind of want to build this in chunks as if I were constructing a real home almost. And the reason for that is later on I'd really like to make this destructible also. Although a big focus of this will be just to create a prototype, pretty basic, clean gray clay render item, and we're not going to worry about getting too much into detail, but still making it destructible would be nice, and we could always then paint on textures and such later. So the first thing to add after the base floor would probably be actually a second floor that I know I'm going to have, and in this case I would like it to be, say, 2 meters up. I'm going to go into a side view and turn off that background so I can see a bit better. And using ProGrids here, I can move this up. Make sure that your pivot here is set not to center, but actually to pivot point. Just notice that was wrong. So now you see that the pivot shows at the actual pivot location, not at the center of your object. And that's really helpful for making sure you're moving things exactly. So anyway, right now I have my grid set to 1 meter. It's pretty hard to see, especially in the video. I'm sure that's tough to see. So I'm going to go into Edit, Preferences, click on ProGrids, and turn up the alpha values on this grid just so I can see it a bit better, and especially so that you guys can see it better in the tutorial. I'll turn up the 10th line quite a bit too. Alright, so now we can really see that grid showing up, and I'm going to take this duplicated floor, maybe go back a second. So to duplicate that, just with it selected, Control D, standard Unity setup, nothing special there. And I'm going to move it up 2 units. In this case, each unit is a meter, since I have ProGrid set to 1 meter. So that's about a 2 meter height. And actually, since in games I noticed things feel a lot more claustrophobic than they might in real life, realistically this house would probably have a 2 meter high ceiling. Let's go for 3 just to make it feel a little better while the player is in it. So now we have the 2 floors we can start with and start building off of. So the second floor, I know I want to actually kind of stick out a bit here. So I'd like this to pop out a little further. One thing while you're doing this, if you hold S with ProGrids on, you'll notice that it only snaps in the direction of the arrow that you are using to move the object. If I don't hold S while I do that, just like that, all the verts in the selection that I have are going to snap to the grid. In this case, their closest location is all the same, on the Y anyway. So you're snapping down to sort of an infinite point there, so that would be bad, but just hit Control Z, easy to do, and then hold S. You could also just use the minus key on your keyboard to make that grid smaller, but since I'm starting out with just the really basic stuff here, I don't want to get real detailed on the grid. Once you start doing that, it's really easy to get Basically just too detailed before you're ready to. So I'll keep it at 1 meter. I usually do that for as long as I possibly can to keep everything really simple, and then I start digging down into further detail levels. So I'll hold S and move this over, say, an extra 3 meters, and then maybe the same with this other corner here. And actually, let's make this a little more interesting. I'm going to make this part of the upper level stick out only on one section. So this lets us get in and do a bit more complex editing as well. So I'll move to edge mode by clicking on the edge mode icon up here. I'm going to select just one of the edges that rings around the floor on the top and hit Alt U, and that will insert a new loop. So edge loop modeling is really powerful. Oops, and there's, we want to hold S while we're moving that. It allows you to do a lot of nice stuff and is a big feature for ProBuilder Advanced. If you're just using the ProBuilder Basic, you won't have that feature, but you could do it in other ways. Probably the simplest being just to grab this face, hold Shift and extrude. Hold Shift and S. There we go. Making it look more complicated than I ought to. And move it out. That's maybe also a good argument for using the plus and minus keys again. I could just real quick drop that down to 0.25 or 1/4 of a meter and then pull it out, and I don't have to worry about holding Shift if that's starting to trip you up a lot. You can also, if you're having trouble making sure that's exactly 2 meters, which might be tricky, you can just use, if you go into the inspector or look over here while you have a face or edge or vertex selected, or multiple, and use the quick offset section. So I know I want this to move 2 meters on the X, just type 2 and hit apply offset, and it'll move it exactly. If I wanted to move 2.157, type that in, hit apply offset, it'll do that exactly. So there's a lot of good shortcuts like that. Make sure you're looking through and using those as much as you can. So I've moved this out, and what I'm actually trying to do here while I keep talking and talking away is to pull out just a section but not the whole thing. So here I want this to maybe go, I'll just keep it at 3, so I'll pull this out another 3 to the right here. I'm going to actually move my grid back up to 1 meter just because I like it to look nice and clean. And then I'm going to hold Shift and click on the Extrude Faces button in the toolbar, or sorry, Alt. And this will bring up the extrude settings. Anything you set in here is going to stick as the default from now on. So I'm going to keep Extrude as group on. I'm going to set distance to 3 meters. At this point, I could just close the Extrude settings box, and anytime I click this button now, it's going to extrude 3 meters instantly. Or with that open, I can click on the Extrude Faces button at the bottom. Either way is the same, no difference. So there, now we have our second floor with a little bit of extra detail sticking out that we can add in, both to the X direction and Z direction. And then here, I guess we'll go ahead and start building in the walls for this. Okay, so walls. I could do this a couple of different ways, or actually many different ways. Let me just demonstrate. Probably the simplest one would be to add some new loops. So I've added my loop, and I'm going to just pull this over. Let's drop down the grid at this point, which is it's a little too soon, but that's okay. We're adding walls. They need a little extra detail. And let's say a standard medieval wall. I have no idea. Let's just make it 1/4 of a meter wide, just because that's a nice easy number here. I'm going to drop a loop there, and then I can continue to do the same on each of the corners. And basically, once this is done, I'll skip ahead a little bit here. I'm going to select all of these, and I'll just hold Shift and pull it up and start building up the wall, just like that. So that would be one way to do it. Another way, let's just undo all these. Alright, another way, again, if you just have ProBuilder Basic and you don't have access to that edge loop modeling stuff, just hold Shift and pull it out. In some ways that's actually almost easier, so hey, yeah, that's pretty great. So that's one way to do it. or the second way. And you could probably imagine quite a few others. In this case, I'm actually going to do neither of those. And like I said, I want to build this out of separate chunks so that later on I can actually make it destructible a little more easily. So I'm going to build entirely new objects for these walls, and I think the easiest way in this case is just a regular Control K, and then make sure I'm back in object mode by clicking the object mode icon here. And I'm going to hold V and snap the corner right over to the corner of my foundation here, and then start building this out. So I know I want it to be that wide, and I'm getting this width, I'm guessing it, not really guessing it, but getting it exactly on. Number one, because ProGrid's in the background lets me know, but also visually I can tell because of the prototype texture on here. So if you look at this, one of the main reasons we include this texture is we've set up these little indicators, visual indicators on the texture. Each of these slots, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, each of those is a quarter of the texture space. So as long as you have your UVs set up well, and they should be automatically with ProBuilder, it's all taken care of, no work for you, then you just know that you're moving it exact amounts without having to worry about it. So that's generally how I'm assuming how much I'm moving it. Or not assuming, knowing exactly. So that's 1 meter I know that's 2, 3, and 4 just by counting 1, 2, 3, 4 of these texture chunks. Losing words. I notice right now something too that's helpful to me, but probably more of a problem in this video, is this, the ProGrid's visual grid is changing depending on how I move things. And generally that's useful, but for this video, let's go ahead and turn that off. Just one more thing to look at in preferences under ProGrids. And I'm going to, oops, I meant to say, it's in here. I'm going to turn off the predictive grid. Forgetting these things. Okay, so now, no matter how I move things, the grid's going to stay the same. So I'll just drop this back to Y because I usually like it to be sort of on the bottom of things. That's also the way the standard Unity grid looks. If I turn off ProGrids and turn back on the Unity grid, you can see it there. That's what you're probably used to, so that's usually the best to stick with if you feel like something is confusing you. So I'll keep it that way and continue building out my wall here. I could build this out of separate sections for each side, and I think I will actually. That way I can place pillars on the side a little more easily. So I'm going to give that just about a 1/4 meter of room. Control D to duplicate and move this over, and continuing the same, I'm just going to rotate and move, use the snap feature to get that right on. Oops, not the wrong hotkey there. And we've got some walls. So again, this method obviously takes a little more time than the others, but I'm just kind of future-proofing because I know I want to do something a little more complex with this. And of course it takes a lot less time if you are not explaining it and making mistakes as you go. So we've got some walls here. Obviously we've got a big problem. We can't get in anyway, so I'm going to leave a little space for a door in the front, which I decide I shall put, why not right there. So I'll just pull that face over, Control D to make a copy of that, and pull this wall over here. Something that's happening right now that some of you have probably experienced and get a little confused by is the pivot point is suddenly way over here. And that's happened because originally it was at a corner of the object, but then we moved all the object's faces, and of course the pivot, as it should, stays where it is. If it moved on its own, that would be pretty confusing as well. But now we have ended up with a pivot way over here, especially on this one that we've edited so much. So how do we fix that? Really simply, just select the object, and you can do a couple things. Just click on the Set Pivot to Center, which will set the pivot to the center of whatever you have selected. In this case, it could be multiple vertices, it could be a face, it could be the object itself. In this case, I just want it to be one exact corner or vertex of the object, so I'll select that one right down there and click on Set Pivot. And now, if I go back to object mode, that's my new pivot. So it makes a lot more sense to have that there. You could, again, just go back to using the center mode here. I really prefer to see exactly where the pivot is on an object, but if you prefer, just keep this on center. I guess that's just a bit of whatever works best for you. So with this item, I'm also going to go ahead and set its pivot to its corner, and the others are close enough that I'm not worried about it right now anyway. So this is going to be our door. Let's make it a little more door sized. So again, looking at these textures, I see this is about 2 meters wide. That would be a huge door. Let's make it 1.5, and then take a look at that. So again, the big plus with ProBuilder is I can just take a quick look at this instantly, turn on my FPS controller, and let's take a walk around inside. So that door looks actually a little narrow, and that's kind of what I was saying before about in 3D, how you start to notice that things feel more claustrophobic than they really are. So I think if I made that door 2 meters wide, that would actually be best, even though that's about a 6 foot wide door, which is just kind of crazy. Maybe it's just in my head that this feels too small, but you know, if it looks good, then it's good, is what I've kind of worked by for a long time. So our interior space is looking all right. I'll fix up that door, and then I think the next thing will be to cut a hole in the top and add some stairs so we can get up to the top there. Select exit play mode, grab the face on this door, and just pull it over so now it's 2 meters. Alright, so this is getting into a bit more complex stuff where we need to cut some holes in things, measure some stuff, and put in the stairs here. So how can we do this? One method we didn't look at before that we could do is using the basically a method of inset. So I can grab the top and bottom faces of this top floor here that I want to put a hole in, and just hold shift, drag in on one axis and then a second axis, and this is going to create an inset. I can then just hit backspace to delete those faces, and I've got a hole made that I can start editing and setting to the actual size that I want. So again, that is using the shift while scaling, which creates a new face, very similar to shift while moving creates new faces, or shift while rotating. So all these do basically the same thing, except what's the word, modified by the translation, the control you're using, move, rotate, or scale. So we have a hole there. That's one way to do it. You could also use our experimental Boolean tool in our tools ProBuilder experimental Boolean. As I've mentioned a lot in the past, I'm not a big fan of using Boolean because it creates geometry in the background, and I like knowing exactly how it's all created, but I think that is changing. This has gotten a lot better recently, and it's just a really useful and quick way of doing things. So we're looking into how to actually do a bit more of that, have a really neat version, but I'm getting way off track. Let's just use what we've created here to put in a stairway. So I'm going to select all the edges around the edge here and hold shift and pull them down. One thing you'll notice right here, actually I'm glad I kind of did this wrong, but it might show something that a lot of you have run into. As soon as I pulled this down, you can see in green the new edges, they actually moved just a tick, and they're now off from the other edges, and that's because they've instantly snapped to the grid when I started moving them, which is correct, it is what I want, but it reminds me that I forgot to snap these new edges to the grid. So I can select those, and that's because when I scaled them in, it doesn't snap to grid while scaling, usually because snap is a lot more of a just kind of eyeballing thing. When you're scaling things up and down, you don't want it to be snapping real exact. But quickly I can select these, and I'll actually do the bottom at the same time. Might be easier to do it this way, and just click on the snap to grid button in ProGrids, and now they're snapped. I'll need to do the same for the bottom faces also. Oops. So select all these bottom faces and quickly snap those to the grid, and let's weld those verts So these verts, we just moved the new edge right onto this vert. But the kind of invisible problem is, of course, that this edge is not actually connected there. It's placed there, but they're not connected. So we need to weld those verts. So just do a drag select, grab all those verts, others, it doesn't really matter, and use the weld tool. So down here in the ProBuilder toolbar, again, you can hold Alt and click on that. And usually you can just set this at something like 0.001 and walk away, leave it there, never change it. The purpose of weld is just to weld everything that's within a certain distance. So for example, if I use the collapse tool, it will do completely what we don't want and collapse all those down to a single point regardless of where they are. However, if I use weld, it's only going to weld, as in it says right now, 4 vertices. It'll only weld the ones that are within that exact distance. In this case, I've set that to 0.001, so basically nothing. So it's welding all our verts that we've placed right onto each other. So now if I try to move this single vert, you can see they're all connected again there. And they don't auto-connect because there are a lot of times when you're building much more complex geometry than something like this, where you want it to stay separate because you're doing more complex actions. But it is something we've thought of in the future to almost be a separate version of ProBuilder entirely, or something, who knows, where it would do things like that, where it would automatically connect, where a lot of things are based off Boolean, etc. Sort of a dead simple version of ProBuilder where you probably couldn't do as complex stuff, but it would be a really, really fast, simplistic modeler, which I think a lot of people really want anyway. And this would be a good time to chime in and let us know, do you prefer complexity or do you prefer just really fast simplicity? And since this is mainly geared towards prototyping, we're starting to think more and more that really fast simplicity might be the way to go. Not for ProBuilder necessarily, but at least for a future different version. So I'll stop rambling here and actually do something. Let's place this stairway somewhere over here. We can always move it. And let's make it an actual exact size. So let's turn back on ProGrids. And I'm going to make this stairway, I think 2 meters wide, just like the doorway is pretty good. And we'll just grab all the faces around it, or the stairway pit here, and move it around somewhere over here. So if this is coming up in this direction, the players are going to need to be able to walk out and around it. That would actually be a terrible location for the stairway there. In the middle of the house seems good enough for now. We can always move it. So let's just leave it there, and then let's add in the actual stairway itself. So here, a lot of the work is done for you. We can hit Control-Shift-K, choose a stair object. There we go. And now we get this handy-dandy stair shape. So we know that it is 3 meters up to the top, where it needs to connect, right up here. And we know that it is 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half long. Let's go ahead and make that an exact 5, just to keep things cleaner for now. I find that a nice rule of thumb for stairways is to make them twice as long as they are tall. So 3/6 would be perfect. I'm just going to change this stairwell so that it is 3 high and 6 wide, and then we might have to change around the sizing of the room a little later. Not a tough thing to do though. So with our stair here, I'm going to maneuver this preview item into position a little better later. But real quick, I'm just going to set up a few things here. I do want it to build these sides. I'll set the steps a little later. I don't want any curvature on it. It's not a curved stair. The width, height, and depth. This is what we're looking for. So with that, let's go ahead and make the width 2, the height 3, and the depth should be 6. So we've got our stair steps. 6 steps looks alright. I'm going to up that to maybe 12. I think that's a bit better, and click on Build Stair. Oops, looks like I was in an element editing mode that whole time, and that's why I wasn't seeing the pivot showing up. So I'll just make sure and move back to object mode. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees and drop it down to the floor using the V-snap. Actually, it might be easier to drop it straight up to that, and then I'm going to pull it down just to make sure it's lined up with that hole that we created. So there we have a stairway. Pretty clearly it's sticking way too close here. So we're going to need to extend some parts of the house here. It's got a lot of room in the back. I'd say we could change that up and pull it back a bit more. So I'm going to pull it back a whole meter. And actually, I'd like to move this over to the side, I think. I think it makes more sense to have the stairway on the side. And then let's move the stairway hole over to match. And back a meter as well. Okay, let's give that a try with the player, see how it goes. So I can walk around in here and up the stairway. And that lip is a bit close to the head as we're going down, but maybe it's good to have a little bit of a semi-claustrophobic feel in this. I kind of like the little corner this creates. Might edit it, I might not. But we're pretty well on our way. Let's exit play mode and start looking around. One thing that some of you might be noticing is we have a lot of extra faces in here we don't need, so it should do a quick little bit of optimizing on this. Not really necessary this early in a prototyping stage, but can't hurt just doing this is a good time to show it. So obviously we have this stairway right up against the wall here, so we're not seeing any of these faces on this side, so it'd make a lot more sense just to delete all of these. You could click on each face at a time, or just use the grow selection tool. So in the selection area here on the toolbar, all the blue items, you can alt click on the one with the plus sign, so we're growing, and I'm going to turn on restrict angle. I'll leave the angle around 42, that's the max angle. Leave iterative alone. Now that's the default. So now anytime I click on a face and then hit Alt G, it's going to grow the selection instantly to all the faces from that starter selector face that don't go past that max angle. So you can see it doesn't go around the corner here. If I selected any of these stair steps, it won't do anything at all. As it says, nothing to grow because all these angles are 90. They're way past 46 or 42 that was set to. So anyway, in this way I can grab just one on this side, hit Alt G, and then hit backspace. Oops, I hit two keys at once. Sorry about that. I hit backspace. I'll redo that to make it look a little more obvious. So again, Alt G, grab the selection, backspace to delete all of those. And there is none already on the bottom, I believe. Yep, none on the bottom. So we're good. We're good on that. Something that's going on right now is it's getting a little tricky to maneuver around in here because we've got walls and ceilings and other things, and as I'm looking around it's just getting annoying. So I'm going to open up Pro Groups as well and add a little to this with that. So using Pro Groups you can do a lot more than is otherwise available with just dragging things around in the hierarchy into and out of each other. So that messes things up in a real bad way, especially once you start coding things and such. Pro Groups doesn't mess with the hierarchy at all, but we can use it to basically hide, in this case I want to hide all the walls or the floors or just details or something like that. So first things first, let's actually name these walls real quick. Just good to do, so I'm going to call this wall 1. If I were really smart, I would probably call it North Wall or something like that, but I'm not really smart apparently, so I'm gonna go with good old wall 1, 2, 3, 4, blah 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 blah. this is a good learning lesson to name things right the first time, and then every time you duplicate it, you won't have to rename it because Unity will automatically give it a new name with a new number. Instead of just cube 1, cube 2, cube 3, those could already have been wall 1, etc., etc., etc. So this is floor 2, and the bottom one, of course, is floor 1. And this is our stairway. Oh, it's already called stairs. Hooray. Okay, so ProBuilder did some extra work for us there. So I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to call this group walls. And I'm actually just going to select all the walls first, and then hit plus. And now those are all in there, and I can just real quickly turn their visibility on and off. I can select them all instantly. I can also just freeze them. So now, as you can see, even if I drag select, I cannot edit those walls, which is a really great option for when you don't want to accidentally edit something. In this case, I can just hide them, and now I can see right in here without them getting in the way, but they're not gone. They're just kind of, well, I don't know what I'm trying to say. They're hidden. They're hidden, obviously. Nice and easy. I can also do the same for the floors. So I'm going to select the floors. Call this new group floors. Very creative. And now I can toggle on and off the floors real quick so I can see in more easily. I could also create multiple groups with the same items in it. So I could have floors. I could also have first floor and second floor. Anything like that. You can mix and match things between groups. That's not a problem. Another big reason this is much, much better than using the standard hierarchy, dragging things in and out of each other. That's just asking for a lot of trouble down the road. Anyway, enough of that sales pitch or whatnot. But please use it. It's so helpful. Let's see. We need to add walls to the top, obviously. We could add windows down on the bottom. But basically, that'll come down to the same sort of technique as when we added the hole in the second floor up here, so that we could bring the staircase up to it. So I won't go over that, I think, just yet. I might just add those in and skip to it, so you aren't seeing things over and over. As for adding walls up here, it'll be a little different than the bottom. It's going to be a little more complex. So let's jump right to that. And come to think of it, it may not actually be complex at all. First, make sure and unfreeze those walls so we can select them. And then I'm going to grab, I think, actually all 4 of these. Unity has that really fun bug where if you click on anything and your intersection or your selection intersects anything else, it deselects it. Okay, anyway, got our walls. We'll hit Control D, and I'm going to bring these up right on top. So here's walls for the second floor, and these of course are going to be moved out. In this case, since I don't actually know where I might want any windows and I don't need these double sections to be, I'm just going to delete one of these to make it simpler on myself. And then I will grab this wall, move it to match. This one is going to have to move up to here. And this is where things get a little bit different. Now instead of having a, what would you call this, an outward curve or corner, we now have an inward one. So I could do this simply by holding Shift, pull it over, grab this new wall, pull it over, and really I could continue doing this all the way around if I wanted to. Just like such, just continually pulling each chunk and leaving another little extra bit at the end, so that I can keep grabbing. So that would be one way. Again, I want this to be destructible, so I'm kind of making things a little more difficult than normally. And I don't want to do that. I want to make all of these little bits out of separate pieces. So I'm actually going to go back and, in this case, just, I guess I didn't have to grab this section of wall. I made that harder than I had to. But any section. And then I'm going to use this just to fill that in. And of course this one I'll pull all the way over to the corner there. I think probably the next thing is going to be adding those corner sections, and then we'll add in the windows. This part comes down a bit to how we want things to look. Well, let's fix the pivot on this crazy one. Put you right there so it's not just disappeared. So at this corner, I could do it a couple different ways. I could leave a block out here if I know that I'm going to want the pillars, those wooden pillars you see a lot on these medieval type of houses, if it's going to be coming up through there. And it probably is, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that open, and in fact I'm going to edit all of these other ones to have that same bit of extra distance so that a pillar can really come up through there. And in fact I'm going to create sort of a test for that. So I'll hit, let's just do a regular Control K, pop in what might be a pillar there, and I'm going to make these pillars a little smaller than this, right about there. And pull this down. If you hold V on the keyboard while moving something with a single direction, it'll actually snap to other vertices. So that's really handy. I can make sure it snaps instantly right to the bottom like that. Instead of kind of eyeballing it and guessing it, which is really annoying, it's snapping right to where my mouse is, to the closest vert it finds there. So that's right to the bottom. And that is actually way too thick, I can tell right away. That wouldn't make any sense at all. I really probably want these to be about half a meter at most. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I think later on I would actually go through, drop my grid down even another level, and maybe pull these out just an eighth. So they have a little bit of a bump out like that, just to give it some visual definition. But even that's getting pretty large. But if this were going for like a nice stylized look or something, that would probably be alright. But with a more realistic look, those are some real thick pillars and don't really make sense to be like that. So this is just coming down to aesthetic preference. I'm going to move this back in so it's just a half for now. And I'll figure that out later. It's not really a big deal yet at this moment. So that's going to be my general pillar size. And I'll start placing a few of these around and just start to get a feel for how I might want them to look. And this one I still need to change a bit. Let's go in. Oops, I'm still at 0.125. Hit the plus key to up that. Make sure I'm still at 0.25. I don't want to get too detailed yet. And I'll go around and do this to each of these. Pull that in just a tad and a tad. And while I'm doing this, actually, once again, I should have given these a proper name. I'm going to be lazy. I'm just going to select each of these poles that I've created, and I'm going to create a new group. I'm going to call it vertical poles. Spelling. And hit the plus button, create a new group for those. And now I can quickly just turn those on and off, hide them if I want to, or select them all at once. And the reason I want to do that is because if I select them all at once, go into my Vertex coloring palette, and I'm going to give them all just a really slightly brown color so it's a little more obvious what they are, something like that. Oops, make sure and first apply the Vertex colored enable shader of one sort or another. So let's see, Vertex, where do we have that? This will teach me not to prepare, or it'll teach me to prepare things before I start into a tutorial like this. Can't seem to remember where that went to. And that's it, of course. I just we have the shader, but I need to create the material. I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this Vertex Colored. So with this, I'll change the shader to ProBuilder and then the standard Vertex color. And this is just a standard shader, so it can do all the awesome regular things that the Unity standard shader can do. Once again, I'll click on select next to vertical poles instead of doing it one by one as I started to do. And that grabs or selects all those poles at once. And then I'm going to just apply that material to all of those. So let's drag and drop Vertex colored into one of the slots on the material palette and click on the apply button next to it. And we forgot to set that texture. Base color, select prototype. Or is it called grid? There we go. Grid box. Okay. Perfect. So now with all of these selected, I'm going to drop on, it could be any color at all. Oops, one more problem here. Alt click, I don't want the painter, I want the palette, of course. So with the palette, now I can apply it. Sorry folks, late night, doing tutorials without any preparation. This is what happens. Well, at least it's good. Maybe you are seeing some things that might come up and confuse you while you're working. At least I know exactly, usually, pretty close to what I've done wrong, and I can fix it quickly, and you'll be able to know then for the future how to do that yourself. So once again, I probably jumped through that too quickly. This again, it has that little plus sign above the item in the toolbar, so that means it has extra options other than what normally happens when you simply left click it. So if you alt click that, because it has the extra options, I have some settings I can choose. In this case, the Vertex color editor can either be a simple palette or it can be the painter. And as a quick demo, you can use that painter if you want, and you can actually paint on stuff, kind of like that, in case I wanted to make this a little fancier. However, for this I'm trying to keep it simple, so I'm just going to use the palette. And let me reselect this and apply just one simple color to that. So this allows me to see that it's a little, that it's a different item a lot more clearly. So you use this at the same time as using Pro Groups to turn the visuals on and off. Now you also have a little different color just for that. Let's do the same thing to the walls also. We forgot to add these items to the wall group. I'll take care of that now. So let's just add this to walls. So I'll drag and drop it onto walls here. And now it's been added to the wall group. Select all those walls, and then let's give those a color, something, could be bright pink, but we probably don't want that to be the case. So I'm going to go with something that looks a little bit like plaster. Add that on. While we're at it, let's go ahead and actually I'm going to select these vertical poles, set their color to something a little more actually brownish. Maybe that. And then I can set these foundation chunks to be more of a dark stone color. Just a tad of blue into that maybe. So that's a pretty quick and easy way to add some visual distinction to your items. I'm going to say those, I'm just being too picky here, but let me just change that wall color up, or sorry, the foundation color a little bit. I don't want it to be quite so dark. Oops, I selected the wrong items. Control Z. Floor, floor, apply. Okay. Let's work on these poles. I think they're not really working out. Or better than that, let's go ahead and give this a quick playthrough and see how this is looking. So it's not bad. On the inside, again, we could probably pull these out a bit to add some definition. We'll do that later. Otherwise, it's looking pretty good. Let's go back to working on this. So let's continue building in these poles in at least a basic fashion. There's going to be so much to change later, but A big part of prototyping, I think, is to just move with things and not think about it too much. A lot of times, good stuff kind of works its way out in the end, especially as you get further along. So I'm going to keep sticking these together, not worrying too much about the Z fighting going on and the exact sizes and blah blah blah. Just going to keep it real simple. I should actually fix these real quick. Make sure that these are actually fitting the poles. Go around and do that. Those are good, those are good. Alright, we need to edit these. And this inner corner is being a problem. As you can tell, it's sticking out here. On these other parts, it is not. So we have to kind of figure out how we want to do this. I'm going to just go with this so that it matches how we've done the other sections. So what that means is it's actually going to be on the inside here. Well, let's match it to the bottom. That's really the simplest way. We've got it matched on the bottom, and that means whatever we have up here is what we're going to want here. So I'm just going to go with that. Again, just keeping things pretty simple at this point, not worrying too much about it. That looks all right. If I were a peasant building my house, I'd say that seems all right. Or I would collapse from the actual work that it would be requiring. That's more likely option. So anyway, okay, we've added those in. We're only missing one on this corner, but this only goes part way up. So I'm going to just grab one of these, Control D to duplicate it, move it over here, and actually I would like this to go all the way through. So I'm going to move these over, and then just actually I'll make a copy of this wall and pull it over here and match it up to there. So we've got the start of it here. I think next thing, a lot could be done with this poles, or a lot needs to be done with these. They're clearly not right yet, but that's okay. I'm going to start adding a roof onto this, and we'll work with these poles a little bit later. So a couple different ways we could do this. It could slant up in a V going this way. Maybe this way. This could be an extra little set off to the side. I do think I'm going to make a large V on the top and a small V over here on the right. That's going to get pretty complicated to do, but that's alright. That's the point of this tutorial. So let's start out with just another Control K. And once again, I'm going to move the corner of this right back over onto the corner here where I have my walls coming together. And I'm going to start building up. Let's think about this. We can do it two ways. Maybe we build the trusses that are going to be on the inside. And in fact, I think that's best, again, just because we're thinking of making this destructible. So if I make the trusses on the inside and those parts, like the poles, won't be destructible, just the walls will be, then I can kind of build the walls around that structure. And it gives us something to build from pretty simply. So I'm going to do that. In which case, I could actually build this from, or directly from, these poles here. So I can actually just grab this and start pulling it up and over and such. But I do think I'm going to keep using separate chunks for this. It's a little less efficient. Obviously, you have more objects, you have more vertices, but we can always merge those objects together and clean up unused faces and verts and so forth. This way I just have a bit more control over it. I can use pro groups with it to hide and show things a bit more. And there's always the option to merge it later. I've found more and more while working that it tends to end up better if I worry about the more complex parts of optimization later on and stick to just making things look good first with the with basic optimization, so I'm not falling real behind in any obvious way. But I think it tends to be more important just to get your vision or your idea out there, and then start kind of paring it down and making it good later on, especially with a prototype item like this. Optimization might not even be important at all at this point. You're just going to get a good looking house or whatever it is and go with that. So I want this to go all the way over to the center between this pole and that pole, and that's going to be a little bit challenging to find exactly where that center is. I also want to make sure this is an exact 45-degree angle. I'll explain that a bit more as we're going forward. It'll become clear why that's important to keep things simple. Let's also change up how this works a bit to make it, I think, look a bit better. I'm going to pull this up so it has its own 45-degree angle there. That would be correct there, actually. And this is going to, oops, need to grab all those verts. That's not doing what I want, sorry. Okay, so I must have accidentally turned off the select hidden elements. So I do want this on, and what that means is, as you're seeing here, when I drag select, it's going to select everything, including elements that are hidden by other items. So if I have this off, when I drag select, it's actually not selecting this corner over here because it's hidden, it's behind the other item. In this case, I want to make sure that stays on, so when I drag select, it also selects that hidden item. So we have that. I'm going to set that there, and I'm going to start actually building this out. Bring this back down, and we'll move it around a bit later. And I'm going to go into a direct side view. So I want this to be an exact 45-degree angle, just so it's a lot easier to line up using that grid. So kind of as you're seeing here, now as long as I keep it on an exact 45, it's going to line up with other pieces. And that's really going to come into play later on when we're adding this extra slanted chunk that has to connect over here. We'll see how that works pretty soon. So to keep this moving up at a 45, we've got a couple options. I can kind of eyeball it and do it one at a time, etc. But the really easy way, or one of those, is just to use the angle option here. So if I turn on the show angle, then I can have this handy dandy angle measurement that shows up at the center of my screen, and I can move it along that angle, and then I know it's right on the 45. And you can set this within the settings options here, the angle option there. Another way to do it is I could use the handle coordinates option. So instead of being in global mode, I can change this to planar. So now if I select just that face right there, you'll see that the handles change to match the direction of the face. It's the same thing if I'm selecting in the other face here. They change to match, versus in global mode it simply matches. Really you can see it best with the view gizmo up here on the right. In this case, change that to face. It's going to follow with it, and then I can just pull it straight up. So that's a really handy way, instead of having to kind of guess it like this. Just use the planar. So to get these two corners to match up, I'm actually just going to pull this a whole bunch of the ways. Or if I were smart, actually, also, I could just use this angle guide, bring it to the center of that. Then I'm going to duplicate this, rotate it around 180 degrees, and pull it over here. And that got moved just a tad. Put that back together. Oops, I was setting the angle along the corner of this. So I actually need to pull this in till it links its bottom up with that pillar. And then pretty simple to just pull this down. Here we need to put these two together. I think the simplest way is going to be to delete one of these faces then hold shift and extrude up. In retrospect, that's actually not the easiest, but it's going to work. Then let's just to keep in mind what you've done when you held, or when I held extrude and extruded this one up, is it does create the extra face in here. So it's doing a proper extrude, it's doing what it ought to. But you got to remember that that extra face is created in there. So if you do that, you then have to kind of go in here on the inside and delete that extra face. And then it's cleaned up, and now we can weld these together. Alt-V should weld them properly together. Let's see what I'm forgetting. Oh, of course, these two objects aren't merged. We need to do that. So select the object on the left here and the object on the right. And I'm going to click on the Merge Objects button. And I'll use Merge Delete because I don't need to save the originals. I know I want these to be merged. I don't need the old versions at all. And now they are one single object. Go in, grab these verts, hit Alt-V, make sure they're merged together. I could get a little better on this and do some more optimization. Select this vert and this one and collapse them together. If I just use a regular collapse, they're going to collapse to the center of the two, or the center of whatever you have selected. However, if I use the special Alt click, since again it has that plus icon above the collapse icon, it gives me some options, or just in this case one, and is the collapse to first option. So click the checkbox on that, and now when I collapse these, it'll use the first as the reference point, so everything will collapse to the first vertex that I selected. So I'm going to choose the top and then select this one here and hit Alt-C, and it collapses right to that one there. If you see these sudden black faces, that's just because, as you see down here, the Unity light mapping is automatically going through and doing its work, and we just really changed the geometry by collapsing and changing the vert count. So you get these black faces that should go away once that's done. If it doesn't, there's ways we can get around that. So collapse those, and again do that on the other side. This isn't really necessary, but it is, just simple optimization. It will actually, probably anyway, make your life a little easier in the future, because now you don't have these extra, or before how it was, let's Control Z a few times. There were two faces here, now we just have the one. Oops, now I have to redo that. Collapse these once again. So now there's just the one face here, which is a lot simpler to work with. So there's the start to our roof. I'm going to pull this over. Looks like after I collapsed those verts, the UVs got a little bit confused. So let's go ahead and fix that. It'll be a quick look at the UV editor. You can open that by clicking on this icon with the checker boxed items over here. So bring up the UV window, and we're going to want to just kind of clean up the UVs in this object. So I'm going to double click on the object on one of its faces to select all of the faces on it, and I'll just do a box projection. That's generally about the best way to go. It'll take care of everything in a pretty good fashion. One time where it does have problems is if something is not on a 90-degree angle. So we have these here. They're clearly not being projected quite right, or maybe it's not clear, but they're stretching a bit. There, you can see it better here. And that's not what we want. We want that to be correct. So what I would do a couple different ways. I can click on these on the side, which are looking correct, and then hold Control and click on the other to stitch it. That's still really not what we want, obviously. So let's take that, just do a quick planar on that one. That's going to do a nice simple planar unwrap, and I'll do the same with the other. Now it fits pretty well. And I'm going to just hold Control to stitch it to the bottom, and I'll leave the sides alone because they'll probably be a different material anyway, and that should be fine for this. We're really not going to work too much with materials anyway in just such a simple prototyping demo. So I'll actually also then turn these all back to auto by clicking on Convert to Auto, That way they're going to take care of themselves on their own. So if I'm moving this face around, as you can see, the UVs are just taking care of themselves. I don't have to do anything extra. Now I've actually gotten a bit ahead of myself. We don't want to do this roof yet. Sorry guys. Again, hopefully these watching my mistakes kind of helps, so you can avoid them. We actually really want to keep this as the structure of the building still, and then we'll add the roof on top of that. So let's pull this all the way back, undo all that beautiful work. That's fine. And let's finish up kind of what we started here. So make sure that fits up to that. And before I go too far with this, I'm going to be smart and name this roof support. There's a real name for these things. I forget what it is. But that's fine. And we're also going to give it that color so we can tell that that's what it is. It's support up here. And I'm going to just move this over onto here as well. And we're starting to get into some of the trickier stuff here, where this is now coming right up to the corner, and we have to decide how exactly this is going to actually come past the house. Obviously we can't really just put that here. We've got a bit more we gotta figure out on this. Probably the simplest way really is I need to add another pillar here, one that would go below this. So I'm going to do that. That does seem like the best way to do it. And then this is going to have to become two separate panels. Oops. Alright, there we go. And let's make that fit. So you can imagine these would be bolted together or something through here. And this really could be done simpler if, unlike me, you hadn't decided halfway through to make this into something that could be destructible later on. But I think that's really worth it. It can add a lot to a game. So I'm building this in sections that can later be destroyed. I think that's worth it for sure. So we have a bit more of a problem here also, where now this roof is coming down and into the wall here. So let's see what we're going to do about that. And I think if I were the carpenter or something, my solution would actually be to move all of this a bit further out, so that this has room to come in as a separate piece. I think that would be the best way to go. I'm going to move that about 2 meters outward, and then pull everything else around to rematch up to that. Oops, I missed a edge over here. That's fine. Almost looks like it would look nicer this way, but at this point let's not complicate things even more. Though we will have to add some extra detail in here. Okay, so this is now going to be a little cutout section. In that case, we can add a full loop through and cut this chunk out here. But we're adding extra geometry we don't need here. I'll probably do that anyway, but just to show, you could also just select only the edges that you actually need to put a loop through. Let's turn off the grid so you can see this a bit better. Hit Alt-E to do a regular connection. And now we just have this connection through on just the area we need to edit. So I could now grab these faces here and hit backspace to clear them out. But I think I'm actually going to use that full loop method just because I don't like having floating verts. For example, if I connect this here, I've got this vertex actually floating here in the middle of this edge. It's really not creating any problems. Maybe it's just because I'm old school, but I just don't like having any polygons that are more than 4 sides, quads or tris. So I'm going to do it maybe the complicated way, but the way I prefer. Throw a complete loop through there. I'll end up with more geometry, extra edges that I don't actually need at the moment. Maybe I'll need them later. At the very least, I feel it makes it cleaner and it makes me happier in the end. So hey, do whatever works for you. Then I'll select those faces, hit backspace. These interior edges are missing here. So I'll just grab these two on the edge, hold shift, pull them up. And then once again, we just have to Alt-V, weld those together for those new edges that we extruded upward. So we've changed this a bit, but I think it's going to be a lot better this way. I now need to add another pole into the center here. Trying to remember how I had that set up before. Something like that I think should be okay. I guess I had it on the outside. I'll continue doing it the same way just so I'm not changing anything. And then we'll also duplicate this over here. Pull this edge up. Got a single black face going on here. It may just be that the light map needs to fix itself. It is going along down there. Or I might need to redo some UVs. We'll leave it alone for now. It's not a problem. We'll figure it out a bit later. And I need to just add in a little wall portion over here. Fix this one's pivot. Holding V to snap it there. Or actually using ProGrids just to snap it. And we have that little wall chunk in there now, filling up that corner. And this can pull in one more. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So again, changed a bit, but I think it's changed for the better. I prefer it this way, and it will definitely make this easier to do. While I'm at it, let's add in some extra poles in the middle. It's going to make it look better. Might as well do it now before we start adding on the extra, or the actual roof and such itself. So I'll just add these here. And this is going to have to change. And look at that, looks like we have a vertex. It's not correct. It's alright. Easy to fix. Same thing on the bottom. So I'm really just quickly modifying these. Looks like I left a few vertices off. Let me undo that so you can see what I'm fixing there. I think that's because I had, try and zoom in way under the inside. Here we go. I had the select hidden off, and I didn't realize it. So just another gotcha that some of you might experience. I didn't realize I wasn't selecting all the way through. So I probably left that little mistake on every single one of my walls. That's right, it'll be an easy fix as I go around editing these. Make sure that's back on, don't make that same mistake again. Pull that over, and that one actually looks just fine. Yep, maybe it's not everywhere, maybe it's just a few of these. So we're adding a few more chunks into that. While we're at it, let's go ahead and do it on the back as well. Somewhere in the middle, I'm just kind of eyeballing that for now. We can drop this down. And set this right. Duplicate these both at once, And yeah, looks like I did get the middle, so that's good. And do the same to the front. Make my life a little bit easier, I'll just delete that wall, select these two and the pillar, and pull the whole assembly. Oops, what did I do wrong there? You and you and you. Alright, Unity bug with selection. There we go. Pull these forward. Move this back. And that's a lot simpler than doing it from scratch each time. So we're getting a pretty good shell. It really does look like we're building it up. Let's give this a quick save and a playthrough, see how it's going. So no real light mapping going on right now, so the lighting is a little bit ugly, but still pretty nice. I'm starting to feel like something got that black spot there. We'll take care of that in a little bit. Not too big a worry right now. Yeah, looking pretty good. Something I'm noticing up here, which I probably want to edit on the stairway, is if I really run down this at a fast pace, I think my head might actually end up hitting on that. Or maybe not, so it's not too bad actually. Alright, let's keep on building. So we need to build up the supports for this little small area we added out here, which is continually causing trouble, but hey, that's alright, I suppose. Good to have detail, and that makes it a better video anyway. So we need just a kind of a mini version of one of these supports. I'm just going to duplicate one of these, rotate it just 90 degrees, and then just fit it up. And I will delete the extra portions that I don't need. Looks like that's about correct. And then I'll grab the face, and making sure I'm still on the planar direction, I can just pull that right back up. And the same on the other side. And I believe, yep, that's about the right distance for it to overhang there. And I'll also edit up these supports so they're properly connecting there. And that's a pretty good base for this. We may find we need to add something else to add sort of a secondary piece back here, just to kind of see how this, or feel it out. Oops, meant to do this. I'm not sure, I guess. We'll see as we're adding in the roof if something like that feels necessary. But I think that would come down to more of a detail thing that we don't really want to do right now, or don't necessarily need. So here I'm going to add on the roof at this point. Before I do, I want to make sure that I add all of these into their own group. So I closed Pro Groups. Let's open that back up. And I'm going to create a new group and call this Roof Supports. Click on the plus icon, and now that's all one big group. And this way I can quickly hide those if I need to. Looks like this didn't get added to it, so I'll just take it from the hierarchy, drag and drop it into Roof Supports. And it's been a little unhappy about that. Let's see what I've done wrong there, perhaps. Well, looks like I've found a bug in ProGroups there. That's fine. We can deal with that, so I'll just leave that alone. Anyway, it gets the main supports, so that's fine for now, and I'll have to keep track of that, working on it a bit later. But let's go ahead and add in the roof. So this should be pretty quick and simple. I think I'll use one of these supports and actually build the roof off it. So I'll select the support, duplicate it, move it up just a bit. Then I'm going to pull this down so it overhangs the roof. or the support. And then grab its sides and just pull it over. And it should overhang a bit. Also in these directions. And it should probably be just a little bit thinner. I'm going to go down a level on the grid and make this pretty thin. Just so it looks like a kind of thin, who knows what it would be in real life for that roof, but for now it doesn't really matter. And actually I take that back. To keep things simple still for now, I want to keep it working on a higher grid level. So let me just Control Z a bit, bring that back up to there. Alright, so here we're going to need, we'll need to merge these two angled sections together, which always can be a bit of a complication. Again, you could use Boolean to do it instantly and magically, but I just really prefer to do it by myself, and it does, I think it's just good learning one way or another to do this manually. Teaches some good techniques, so I'll do it that way. So I'm going to make one section of the roof for this side, and then a second that's going to come up over here, and make sure that's setting itself up correctly. And on this side, it can actually come all the way together, so I'm going to hold Shift and extrude that right over. We need to make sure we're deleting these inside faces. So when I pull this together, there are still both this face selected right now, and then this other one over here. So let's delete that face, and then pull this one over as well. And once it's there, I'll hit backspace to delete it. And that way I know there aren't two faces that are overlapping on the inside there. And now we need to add on this slanted section here. So I am thinking, and I could be wrong, but I think the best way to do this is going to be to actually build this roof out of all one piece. So to do this, I actually need to pull this over a bit, and I'm going to throw some extra loops through here. Let's start by hitting Alt-U on there, and now that that 45-degree angle we've been working with starts to come in handy, so that as I move this, I can keep it sticking. I keep it sticking to that line without changing. It's very easy to move these edges up and down without ending up with basically this, a dent or something like that. I can real simply move it along there without that happening. So what I need is to line the bottom of this edge up with the top of the arch here, because we're going to pull out the side of this roof to match this as if it were all one piece. Which will be fine because the roof won't be destructible in this case, just sort of the plaster walls. I think that makes more sense to me. So let's turn off that angle. We don't need that. We know the top of the roof is right here, 2 above that, that darker line. So I'm going to move it down along. It's going to be to right here. And now, if my calculations are correct, I can start pulling this out and matching it up. So first of all, I need to pull this out so I can begin work on this. But once again, we really need to make sure that we aren't doubling up faces. So if I pull this out, because I extruded that, I've ended up with a face here and a face inside of here. So to get around that, first let's just backspace to delete that face. It won't be needed at all anymore. I'm going to select this on its own and pull it over. Now there's still a face on the inside here. I do need to delete that. Let's kind of zoom in, grab it. Might be easier in perspective mode actually. And delete that inside face that shouldn't be in there hanging around. And this will end up reconnecting over here to this one. So once again, I need to actually delete the two faces that are coming together. So I'm going to need to add the same loop through this one that we did on the other side. Let's just go into that side view, and probably easier will be wireframe mode so that I can set that up. Make sure the verts are aligned. There we go. Back into shaded mode so we can tell what's going on. Perspective, so it's a little easier to see. Then I can delete this face that's going to become pressed up against this one. Pull it over, delete that face. And now we have these put back together. So in retrospect, it probably definitely would have been easier to simply keep this as one piece. If you remember back a while ago, I had broken this up into two pieces and did all that extra deleting, but that's all right. We're just learning here, so that's fine. Doing it the hard way, really. So this is also going to have to go over a bit. Before we do that, move it over. Again, it's not connected to this area here, so let's go ahead and merge these two roof sections together. Again, select them both, merge and merge delete. I'm going to weld all those verts to make sure they are back together. And now when I move this, they'll all come together. Better than that even, let's grab all of these around and pull it over 1, 2. I'm going to go with 4 over for now, I think. And we'll move that a little more to get it correct once we have it exact. Now to build out the roof above this, I'll do the same as I did on the main section, Control D to make a duplicate. Pull this up and then pull this out. I believe it was 2 clicks below. Yep. So 1, 2. And this back. And this is going to give us an exact position that then we can use to bring these two parts together. So this is where the roof needs to go, and this is where we need the roof parts to connect here, where we have these pieces coming together. So with the two of these here, they look pretty discombobulated at the moment. We can use them together to make them fit. So I'm going to grab this inside edge that's sticking through here. I'm going to pull it back just until it connects there. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Then on the upper portion, it looks like I was actually incorrect about this. I need this to go up one more. And it really doesn't matter, but I would like to keep all of these edges straight. And it probably doesn't actually matter, but it may in the future. So I'm going to go back into wireframe. I know I have these vertices here that I want to line up with that new one that I moved up using the face. So I'll do that. Back to shaded mode and perspective. And now that's matching up. So we're getting a little bit closer here. And let's pull in this to match in the center. Looks like those UVs are stretching. I think I had set them to manual UVs at one point, so they require human interaction. I'm going to mostly ignore them for now, or actually, let's go ahead and edit those just so that it's not looking so funky. I'll pull this in to show what it's looking like now, and then select any face. I'm going to actually double click to select all of them. We've already skewed these vertices, so it's going to be hard to unskew them without doing a bit more work. So actually Control Z and undo that geometry edit that changed it. Then double click to select all those faces. Go back to UV mode and click on Convert to Auto. And that way they're going to take care of themselves on their own from now on. So So if I select this edge and move it in, there we go. Now they're properly just taking care of themselves. Nothing that I actually have to do. So I can move that edge in to match. I can move this edge in. It's important that now, or that I remember that now I have two edges in the same position. Let's turn off the grid. Okay, or the visuals. So those two edges are coming to the same position, which means there are actually multiple vertices in the same spot there. And we don't want that, so let's drag select and grab the two that are there, hit Alt-C to collapse them, and do the same for the two that are right here in this corner where we brought the edge together also. Alt-C to collapse those vertices. And now we no longer have a problem with that. Then we can also take this vertex on the outer roof. I'm going to use the V key to snap it directly up into there. Now it's matching up with that, so we're getting pretty close. Now we just need to match things here on the side. So that's going to be a matter of taking these verts and matching them to this. And again, since we're using both pro grids and a 45-degree angle, these match up perfectly. I really don't have to do any actual work. I'm just moving them, and I know for an absolute fact that as I move them, they match up exactly as I want them to. So that's a big plus to using pro grids, and you can use other angles besides 45, but it becomes more difficult. Basically anything where you're doing up 1 over 1, up 1 over 2, or up 2 over 1. That's probably something for a different tutorial, but just keep in mind that wherever you can keep things at a 45-degree angle, for basic prototyping construction, or anything maybe stylized or simplistic in its geometry, you're really going to make your life easier, like in this case, where I don't have to worry about it at all. I know that these are matching up perfectly. It just works out that way real nicely. There's some math involved there, but we don't need to get into it. So there, we have our roof sections, oops, almost matched up. Let's make sure and move that to there. Probably forgot the same here, yep. So I can move that to there as well. I'm going to change the handle mode back to global just so I'm not making any mistakes moving things in a planar direction. It keeps it a lot simpler for making sure things are moving correctly. And now once again we have these interior faces we really want to make sure that we delete. So you have in here, this one here, that's on the inside there, and same on the other side. Probably a good way to do this right here is just to grab this object, move it out, and then grab those interior faces real quick. Hold shift to select both, hit backspace and delete it. Grab these interior faces that we no longer need, backspace to delete those, and then we can select this and move it back in together. So there we have a nicely connected setup. Something a little bit funky going on here. It looks like once again we need to, well, it's one thing is doing light mapping down there, but we should probably make all these UVs come together or look a little nicer even with just a grid pattern. So let's once again do a little UV work. I think, as always, the easiest way is select that bottom section there, hit Alt-G to select across, then we're going to go into the UV editor and click Convert to Manual, Planar. And the planar project is just like it looks. It instantly projects it into a real nice, all together as one piece. Alt-G to grab those again, and I'm going to remember to convert back to auto. That way, as I edit things, it's not going to stretch and skew. So here, if I'm moving this around, those UVs will generally take care of themselves pretty darn well, as best they can, being automatic. Obviously, humans do everything better on their own if they really put the work into it, but who really wants to, obviously. Up here on top, convert to manual, planar again, convert back to auto. That's something that as I'm working with it here, and you're probably seeing, there's probably a better way to do it, so I'm going to keep that in mind and see as we go. I'm sure we can figure out something a little fancier than that. Shouldn't require so many steps. This up here, we no longer need this extra geometry. So I'm going to move these together. I'm going to remember to collapse those two and do the same down below. So I'm going to hold V while I'm moving these so I can snap. So you see wherever my mouse cursor is placed, it's snapping to that position, but only in the direction or only on the axis that I'm choosing by clicking on the arrow directly. Otherwise what would happen is it would snap, of course, all the way up to here, which I really don't want. I just want to snap on the x-axis. And make sure and collapse these verts that we just stuffed together all as one. And I'm going to UV these faces together, just as we have been before. Okay, so we're starting to get a bit of an actual house looking thing here, which is pretty great. Oops, I forgot these on the inside, of course. Select those two, collapse them, and fit them up there. Oops. Also UVs, so quick planar project those out. Alright, so we've got a roof. We have the complex bit added in here for the most part. Let's go ahead and give this another playtest. Oops. So it's feeling a lot better with the roof up there. We can actually walk out into this little area here. Roof is pretty darn tall, but that's alright. Feels pretty good. That could be sort of a storage area up there. I don't think we'll have time in this tutorial, maybe in a future, but we could really add a nice look by adding sort of a almost a barn top up there with just a real simple construction-y look with planks and boards instead of this more complete stone and brick or plaster or whatever it would be up here. So that seems alright. I think the next task would be to pull up the walls, make them fit into the ceiling, and then add some actual windows. So let's go ahead and start by pulling these up. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to add in, feels like there should be a support here going across. Something like that. And the same in the back. And right now I do have some extra faces that I don't need, so I can grab those and hit delete. Now at this point I'm starting to realize that I mean, if I wanted to be efficient and proper, I should actually be building all of this structure as one mesh. As some of you are probably already noticing, I actually have a lot of extra faces or invisible or occluded faces being created by having all these separate chunks. All these that are coming together, like up top here and such, they're really not needed to be there, and it would be a lot, well, not a lot more efficient, but it would definitely make a difference, especially on mobile and such, if I were to go through and delete those and turn these all into one complete mesh, merge the vertices, do all that fun stuff. I could do that, and it'd actually be especially easy because I can real quickly just turn off walls and floors. Looks like I forgot to add some walls to that wall group. That's alright. I could go around and grab the support bits. Let's just add these while we're at it to the wall group. And make sure this is actually a new group for the roof. So here I can quickly see all the support bits, and I can just merge these real easily down into one item. I don't think I'm going to do that, at least not yet, just because I may need to edit it later, and it's not actually that big of a performance issue. The main thing is going to be if you have light mapping, those extra little faces may cause some artifacts, or they will use up extra texture space in the light map that you don't want them to. But just for prototyping, it's really not a problem, and you're probably better off just moving along and keeping things happening to get the look that you want, I think, as I keep saying here. So I'm going to ignore that and just continue doing just the basics for optimization, and later on I can go through, and it's not a problem to fix that up later on. So I'll just duplicate that over. I do want both of these to be that brown color. Also, it wasn't obvious, I think I jumped through it a bit too quickly before. I had taken these and I had deleted these extra faces on the outside. So, not sure if that was totally obvious. This stairway should have its own group. I'm going to call it maybe arch details or something. And that way I can quickly hide that and any other items, probably like windows and such, that I'll end up creating. And this FPS controller I'll hide. Okay, so now make sure these all have the same color. I think they might have changed at some point. There we go. Or it might just be the lighting. I think the material is actually different. Let's set them all to this. Okay, there we go. That's better. So there's all our support sections, and we could add a bit more into this as well. Let me just turn back on the walls, see how that's looking, and the floors, and the roof. Oops, there we go. So I'll keep it this way for now. I'm going to start adding in, this tutorial is getting really long, so let's not worry about how good it looks. I'm going to add in just one big top section for the roof here. Pull this right up to the top. Let's go into a side view here to see that more obviously. Sticking those verts together, so we need to make sure that we weld them, or collapse them actually. It's really important to make sure you don't have overlapping verts or faces and such. It just create weird effects, kind of like you can see here how these are, they're Z-fighting, this little area here that I do need to fix up in a little bit. I'm just going to leave it alone for now. But you don't want that going on. Anyway, I'll duplicate that face, or that wall of the house, so I can move it over right here. Let's also make sure these are still, make sure they're in the walls. They're new objects, so we need to add them to that. And we have these odd little gaps between, let's turn off that grid viz, gaps between the wall and the ceiling here. Not sure what the best way to clean that up is. I could, oops, there's a definite vertex issue, okay. I could just pull these up. They're gonna kind of stick through the beams. Not really a problem, it kind of looks alright anyway. And it's not always important to be too perfectionate with this stuff, so I think I am just going to do that. I'll just stick them up and into the beams, as lazy as that might be. It works pretty well. Yeah, I think it looks as if the beams are going through the plaster, which, or not plaster, whatever it would actually be. You could even pull them all the way straight up so they match with the roof. I think that's probably best. Or, as an alternate, maybe I should be adding in, I do think this is better actually, more of these horizontal supports. I think I'll do that actually. So I'll duplicate, rotate that around, and snap it over to here. Set this into place against the other. Grab its verts and make sure they are set up where they ought to be. Yeah, I think that takes care of that issue in a good way. Something odd going on with the Unity here. Okay, that's more correct. So I'll just keep duplicating that then and move it around. So that it fits into everything here and adds the support it needs. We have an extra support. Oops, I need to pull this back down. We do have an extra support, it looks like, coming through here. I guess that's because of this one, which we could deal with. By ignoring it. At this point in the tutorial, I think we'll just ignore it. That's fine. Again, because of the angles and the grid, it comes right together real nicely. And looks fine from both inside and outside, so I'll just leave that alone. It's kind of a lazy choice, but it looks fine, so we'll just leave that alone for now. Then we'll want to do the same thing on the other side, so just select those, Control D, pull them over. And add those onto the corner as well, using V to snap it. Oops, rotated that too much. Pull it in to match. This one's going to need its corners here. Or sorry, its edge. So I'm going to select those two edges and hit Alt B to bridge between, so that that gap is essentially filled in there. I can Control D that, and it should fit right over here. Yep. And put another one here. Edit this one to fit. Getting a little bit sloppy here, I think, just as I try to finish up quick, but oh, don't want to miss this. I actually shouldn't have done that because I've ended up with some different geometry than I actually want. I could have fixed it up, but I think in this case I'm just going to properly duplicate one. Maybe didn't need one this large. And fit it in. You guys will have to let me know how you like these kind of on-the-fly tutorials, if they're better this way because you get to see my mistakes, or if they're just kind of slow and more of a problem. Usually I try to edit a lot and keep out these things so it seems real slick and quick. But hey, if this is working, let me know if you prefer to have these mistake-filled, slower tutorials. I do think they're probably better to learn from, really, but they do take a bit longer, of course. So there we have those added in. Another thing I'm realizing, we probably shouldn't have this floor going all the way out to the edge. That doesn't make any sense at all. There should just be more of these supports, the same as we just added here. So I'm going to go in and change that up. First thing though is let's turn off all the walls. Then let's also turn off the roof and the roof supports and the any of the poles. These we all added recently, so we're going to need to add them to the pole group. We can probably just hide the floors, grab all of these, and then add these directly to the now incorrectly named vertical poles, but that's alright. We can edit that. Click on Modify Groups, go on to Vertical Poles, and we'll just call these supports a little more generic. So there are all of our supports. And we need to add the extras that are going to go down where the walls are. So I'll turn back on the walls, but not those floors. And I'm going to select each of these so that I can pull them down and place them right in there. I think it'll be best to have these supports showing a little bit on the bottom versus the top. So if I turn back on the floors, you'll see here you don't see them up here, but you do see them on the bottom. That feels better to me. Feels more natural. So I'll turn back off those floors, and we'll need to edit the walls a little bit. We can select all of these at once. Move into a side view, grab all these on the top, all the top verts, pull them down, and do the same here. And the fronts will need that also. For these, it gets a little bit different. I guess we just need to edit this real quick so it fits. It is becoming kind of obvious that maybe I should have built all these supports as a single piece. As I start to add these on, clearly it would have been better if I had built them as one piece, but that's alright. Hindsight is always 20/20, of course. Can't expect to be entirely perfect here. This one actually only needs one. It doesn't have that brace down the middle. So set that across. And I think that completes it. I'm going to turn back off the walls, check these supports, see how they're all coming together. And then once again select all of these and make sure they're in the supports group. Turn back on roof supports also. And then we're going to need to edit these floors a bit so that they don't intersect with the supports that we've added. So some of this is pretty simple. I can grab the sides of the floor here, move it over, do the same for these. Using this isometric mode can make things a lot easier. It might look a little confusing at first if you aren't used to using it. Maybe all of you are, and I'm mentioning something not important at all. But I think for a lot of people it might be new, and it's really great in that, so when you're in perspective, obviously you have to really work to line things up, but isometric, I don't know how else to put it other than it looks strange, but it can really help to make sure you're doing things very precisely. So anyway, lining those bits up with the supports, I think I actually did something wrong here. Let's turn back on those walls. And nope, looks like I did do it correctly, because those are lining up, though I'll need to add some extra supports there. Let's turn back off the walls. Okay, so we have a bit of more complex editing to do here. This chunk where the stairway where the stairway hole is, actually needs this extra bit removed. I'll go back into isometric mode here. I could leave it as it is, but it gets a little narrow for the player to climb up, and it's also going to mean I'd have to change the stairway. And it wouldn't make sense for there to be sort of a thin strip of rock or I don't know, stone or whatever this floor is made of there. So I'm going to select all the parts that extra bit is made of and just backspace to delete. And then I can also actually delete all of the exterior parts. Let's see, to make this more obvious, I'll turn off the supports and I'll turn off the roof supports. So all of the outer parts, or at least almost all of the, actually all, because they really shouldn't be there, of the floor here. Easier method. Select top and bottom, hit Alt-G, hit Control-Shift-I to select the opposite, the invert. And now we have all those inverted sections. Make sure we keep the inside here. I think we'll need that. and just hit backspace. We'll need to move these out to match, so it doesn't have that slight angle there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom as well. So grab top and bottom, Control Shift I, backspace, and that gets rid of all those extras. And we don't actually need the bottom to that at all. Doesn't need to exist. Okay, let's turn back on the walls to start. Actually, better would be just the supports and the roof supports. And let's see how this is coming together. I do still have some Z-fighting in the center here. I forgot I'm going to need to chop this up a bit. So let's see. I've added. Here's one of the drawbacks of using that inset option to make extra details. So when I pulled this. When I pulled this face in, or used this scale to make that extra bit of detail to cut out that chunk, it creates less geometry, but it does create geometry that's a little tougher to deal with. So now I have this angled edge going across, where I really don't want that to be there. Couple ways I could deal with that. I could break all the verts along the edges here, or on these points, and then sort of pull this over. I think that's getting a bit too complex. I'm just going to go ahead and cut through here and all the way out to here. Make sure to do it on the top also. Just going to select those edges, hit Alt-E, and now I have a new edge through there. And that edge is pretty close to what I want. Pull this over to there, pull that over to match, and these over to match. And now I have this face that I need to delete. So now if I click on this, there is one danger, as happened right here of course. It's probably going to actually select, because we have the Z fighting here, the two faces at the exact same point in space. It's going to select the other object, not the actual object you want. So let's turn off the supports. Then we can select this, nice and easy. And just go ahead and delete that, it's not needed. Just a quick optimization, we can then pull these over here of course. Collapse them back together, so we don't have those extra edges hanging out there without any purpose. And I could do the same over here, because these edges are just, our verts are just kind of floating there. But I do think they're needed. They could be more useful because we have this section that sticks out here. So they have a bit more of a purpose there than these did, which had none at all. Let's turn back on the supports. So now that goes across there properly. And back on the walls also. So we need to add some extra supports here across the bottom. I'm just going to grab this one, Control D to duplicate. Pull that over and edit it up to match there. Sure, we need one on the other side as well. Don't forget, you can use F to focus in on individual elements, not just the object itself, which is very handy to quickly zoom in and get to items. Let's Control D, copy that, rotate it around. Fix its pivot while we're at it. Set pivot to there. And we're going to place that right about there. Gonna have to do some editing here. Clearly, what did I do wrong? Oop, too high. That's what I did wrong. Pull that over to there. Looks like we've got yet another semi-complex situation where things are coming together a bit strangely. That's alright, that's what this is for. I'm going to pull this through until it connects next to it. And then I'll just make another. And duplicate it. Pull it over here. Once again, I really could be building this out of a single object, and that might be better, but usually I feel once I start doing something in a certain way, I really like to finish it in that same way. Just keep going with it while I'm at it, and that way I know how things are built and don't have to guess how something might be set up, in case I need to edit it later. Just due to the nature of how this pole is in the middle here, I'm going to pull that over to match in that way instead. And then I need to connect its edges here. Which is also going to be a pain for a second or two. Let's see. Could just hide those floors, and that might be a better way to do it. But let's do it this way. Okay, so we're getting closer. We need one across the bottom here. I can just grab one on this side. Ooh, that pivots pretty off as well. We'll reset it, duplicate it, pull it over to here. Oops, moves in on the y-axis at the same time. One there, and duplicate it, put this over here as well. Okay, let's see what's next. This tutorial is getting pretty long, so I should probably finish it up. And once again, obviously if you're doing this yourself, I'm sure you'd go a lot quicker. But I think this is still a pretty good demonstration, how to put things together with hopefully as much detail as people are needing. Let's see, we've got the supports in just about everywhere. They seem to be doing okay. Let's double check, see if I'm missing anything. This is the edge of the house we need to add here. So we could add the wood supports are on the bottom, but I think it would miss a good opportunity to do a little bit more edge modeling and pull out this as if it were a real foundation around it. So what I'm going to do is select the bottom edge here, or for each one I'm going to start kind of pulling it in just so it's on the inside of the wall, so it's not overlapping. And actually, scratch that. I'm going to go ahead and do this the cheap and easy way. Let's just pull this straight out through the wall sections, or through the supports and such. We can go ahead and optimize it more later. It might actually end up being easier that way. Let's see. I'm going to give this all right about an extra maybe meter or so of space, as if it's a real foundation that's sticking out past everything. Looks like this one's a little too short. I'm just going to pull that out a bit further to make it a meter, and actually the same over here. One tick further and that should be good. And this over here, again, is just a little different because of the step out. I'm going to leave that there. I think it's fine. And I'm getting tired. So let's grab all these edges all the way around. And just pull them down. Just a bit. We've got our foundation there. We could then go in and, like I was saying, do this a little more properly. The problem we have right now is, not really a problem, but obviously this entire face is going out through the building. So, good demonstration, I guess. This will be a problem, or at least not as efficient in that, number one, if you're on the inside, it's going to have to also render anything on the outside. So whether you're building this in ProBuilder or you're building it in Max or Maya or Blender, it's a good thing to keep in mind. If you're being lazy like this, like I am right now, you're going to end up causing some problems in the end. Right now it's rendering the inside, but this mesh also extends all the way onto the outside. If I select its faces here, so not only is it having to render lights and such out here, reflections if you have them, it's also doing the inside, which really isn't proper. It should be if you're on the inside, you can only see the inside stuff. It doesn't try to do that. So I'm going to be lazy here, but I'd say you should probably really build this as a separate piece on the outside. And that wouldn't be too tough to do, actually. Even in this case, I could just select these exterior parts, and sure, let's go ahead and do it. I'll detach them to a separate object. Let's make sure and get the side bits as well here. So I've got all this exterior section, and I'm just going to click on the detach button. So I click on that and I choose new object. Submesh will keep it the same mesh but make it a submesh, kind of like when you're applying multiple materials onto items. I want this to be a totally separate object though. So now if I do that, if I look, let's turn off walls and supports and all that stuff. Alright, so now if I look at it, I have this interior chunk and this exterior section that I just detached, and that is a lot better way to do it. So maybe that demonstrates two things, the bad way to do it, and also that even if you do it the bad way first, with ProBuilder or other tools and such, there's always going to be a good way, or hopefully, definitely in our tool, a way to break that off then as a separate. So it's quick and easy to build as one piece. Just go ahead and cheat it, and then later on when you need to be more efficient, you can break it off into a separate bit. Let's turn back everything on so we can see properly. So now we have the separate piece. Getting pretty much good to go here. Let's see what else we could add. Oh, windows. I did say we were going to add windows to this. This needs to get a quick fix up. Let's just pull you up to here, up to the top. Grab, let's see. Let's go back into a side view so it's a little easier to see. Grab you two, collapse together, and the same for the other two. So now that fits into there properly. And let's give it one last playthrough and then quick add some windows to this. So turn back on that FPS controller. Make sure and save in case anything blows up. And click on play. Ooh, I turned off my stairs too. Let's turn those back on. Okay. So, we've got a pretty basic structure going on here. We still need to fix some things up with the stairs. I think that would kind of blend into the rest of the tutorial. I think it should be obvious how to do it. I think I would guess the last thing that might still seem pretty tricky for people, or that's more complex anyway, would be adding in the windows. Let's go ahead and do that. And we'll ignore that stairway looks a little bit funky right now. So let's see. Pretty simple place to plop in a window, and they'll all really be the same. So we'll just do one here. We're at pretty good timeline right now. As before, a lot of ways to do this. You could use a boolean and just cut a chunk right out exactly as you want, or you can use edge loops. So I put one there. I put a second one here. Hit Alt-L to select that whole loop. And then on the other side as well. So this takes a bit more work to do it this way. Maybe that should be about a meter off the ground or so, and this one pretty high up. Just demonstrating, I suppose, the longest possible method first. Delete those faces, and then we're gonna pull this over to there. And make sure we Alt-V to weld those faces. So there's a window one way. Actually, we'll do another one over here. So another way to do that would be to select both the inside and outside faces. hit R to change to the Unity scale mode, and then just scale in, kind of like we did for the Unity bug or our bug there, we'll see. Like we did for the hole for the stairway. So I'm just scaling in to set an inset, depending on how wide I want the window. And probably best just to set it to a fairly generic amount, hit backspace, delete those, and then I'm going to go in and set these more exact once I have actually, once I've scaled it. So I'm just going to end up snapping them to the grid anyway. So here still the end is about the same. One other way to do this also, to make this maybe a little simpler, just thinking of this, is delete just one side. Grab the other side, hold shift and extrude it over, and delete that one. And now you have those edges. Obviously we need to snap all these to the grid. And then you set. So that's a little easier than grabbing each of the edges and pulling them over. Make sure again, Alt-V and weld those vertices. And then you could finesse this window to be whatever size you'd like it to be. Try and make it match up to the other one. And that's pretty much it for making windows. Now you've got them in there. And again, there's also the Boolean option, which kind of takes care of itself, so I don't think we need to show it here. Once you have them there, you'll probably want to do things like add in trim and such to make it look a little better maybe. So I'll Control K, create a new block. Then I'm going to go down a level in my grid level, and I'm just going to add in some details here, make it look a little bit nicer. Some extra stuff here, and you could keep adding around. Maybe this should actually go all the way. Something like do an Alt-U to put in a new loop there, move this over, and I'm gonna, let's see, oh, that's getting a bit more complex, but let's drop that there. Then we can, oops, other side too. This will make sense in a moment. It's easier to show than to tell, I suppose. Now I can grab these edges here, pull them up one more, pull this over, make sure and delete these faces that are coming together. Weld them. And now we have a complete trim. You can go further down in the grid size, select a face, Alt-G. Now we're really just adding kind of unnecessary detail, but not a big deal. And I'm just going to keep adding, make this slimmer so it makes a bit more sense. Oops, make sure you grab that whole section there. Alt-G is really a great keyboard shortcut. Make sure you're using it. So there, a little bit of trim added. You need to come out just a tad. Here's a nice mistake that I made. Let's go back just a tad. So what happened was I pulled this face up, and now what used to be, so originally this is a quad, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 edges on this. Way more easy to see this way, 1, 2, 3, 4. What happens when I pull this face up is that quad becomes sort of a triangle. Technically it still has 4 faces, but that's actually its problem. It's in the shape of a tri, and the this might not be too important, but basically everything is tris, even quads and polys and such. And right now the edge is apparently going, the edge that breaks us into real tris is going between this vertex and this vertex, so that when I pull this up, it's still going from this vertex to this vertex, but now it can't actually describe anything. So previously there was sort of a little area. If I select these 2 verts and hit Alt-E, So you can see how before it basically, or it actually is this, and again this is just everything in any 3D system that I'm aware of anyway, games for sure, everything is tris, so it's got to have only 3 sides. That's how you describe a plane in space, I suppose. So when I move this up, this tri here essentially disappears and now has 0 surface area, so you're going to get a bit of a problem there. And you kind of want to watch out for that and make sure it doesn't happen. ProBuilder will attempt to take care of that, but it can't catch everything, or at least not yet. We'd hope to. If that does happen, there's a pretty simple fix. Let's undo all of those edits. Okay, so I move that up, and now suddenly it's got the problem there because there's a 0 surface area face over there, or triangle. You could select the face, you could delete it and rebuild it. That's a pretty simple way to do it. You could also, before doing this, just Control-Z back, you can force it to have its edge here. So if I connect to those 2 edges, now the triangle is here and here. So if I pull this up, now it's just fine because you've already set the triangle there instead of the other direction. Instead of going from the bottom to the top corner here, or the bottom left to the top right. But that introduces an extra edge. I'm wasting a lot of time on this, but I think it might be useful to people, so I'm going to keep going. A better way to do that, so you don't have this extra edge sitting in here, or it's not really an extra edge, but a explicitly defined edge, would be to just flip the tris on it. So we select it, and we're going to do basically what we just did, except in a way that stays invisible. So if you scroll down and look at the geometry actions, you'll see this little flip face edge. And what that's going to do is exactly what we want here. If I click it, you'll see 0 difference right here. But what's happened is that when I move this up now it's correct because it has flipped so that the triangle actually goes from the top left to the bottom right. So totally invisible change, but it's something that can be pretty important, and again, it's just something that you know, it's hard for a computer to catch, but luckily you're a fantastic human and you can catch that. So it's something that's there that you can take care of. Luckily on these other corners it looks like it already had its tris in the right direction, except for this one here. We can select that, flip the tri, and now it's back to correct. And the others are fine. So I'm just going to, again, grab these. I'm going to pull them out just a tad, give a little more interest. Maybe even give that another color or something like that, so it's clearly trim. And there you go. So you can continue to do that all the way around, of course. Oh good, we've got more ears. So it looks like these faces have lost their UVs. Not sure how that happened, but we can fix it easily. Back to the UV controller, convert to manual, and just give it a quick planar, and then back to auto. All fixed, nice and easy. Yeah, let's give this a quick walkthrough, see how it looks. We can add lots more windows on these other sides easily. If you don't want to add or go through, it's actually exit play mode, and add each of these windows, of course you could just delete this section, duplicate these, and move them around. So essentially just keep moving these to each of the other areas, and then just refit their verts, which might be easier than recutting the whole, might not. Might be especially useful if you want an exact sized window and don't want to have to keep getting it exact. That would be up to you, I guess, to figure out. So let's take a quick look around inside here. Oh, I keep turning off my stairway. Let's bring that back on. Okay. It's pretty neat that Pro Groups will work in-game as well, so you can use it for some things like that as well. And there we go. So pretty basic setup here. Didn't get through as much as I wanted, but I think that's usually the case. Taking a long time, and we could do a lot more. These supports on the edges really should pop out a bit. They definitely shouldn't be so flush to the side. I think I saw one or two spots that still had some Z-fighting, obviously on the stairs. We could do a lot more detailing. But the idea is you get the basic space up and set, and then from here you can do whatever you like. Keep adding the detail here in ProBuilder. You could then just export as an OBJ and start building it out into a really high poly, sexy mesh and something else. You know, it'd be totally up to you. A nice benefit, if you keep it here in ProBuilder, of course, you can continually edit it within Unity without ever having to exit and keep testing, etc. back and forth. And again, we could make this destructible, and I'll try to get to that in a future tutorial. It would be pretty simple. Just use any good destructor kit on the asset store would be a good start. Select all of these wall sections and just tell them to be destructible so they can break apart into chunks. And that way then the structure would remain standing, and eventually you'd have a real awesome blown up structure with pretty much all the walls removed. So thanks for taking a look at this. I hope it helped people out. I know it's gone on quite a bit and I rambled into a lot of other areas, but I think that sort of thing might help. But let me know. I'd love to hear if you guys think the rambling, mistaking, occasional bug finding tutorial is actually useful or not. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in future tutorials.